Aloha, everybody, and Merry Christmas! Finally, at long last, sorry for the long wait, I bring you the Scott Pilgrim reference video. This is going to be talking about all the little in-jokes, all the little video game tips of the hat that Scott Pilgrim loves to throw in this game, and it's probably going to make you decide whether Scott Pilgrim is a homage to video games or a blatant thief. Hopefully you'll understand it's a homage, and that just because it borrows a lot of ideas and a lot of video game themes, that it's not, plagiarism or anything. Scott Pilgrim's a fantastic game, and you all need to play it. And by playing this game, I discovered a lot of nostalgic memories about video games and a lot of video game tropes that I haven't really seen in a while, but when you play Scott Pilgrim, you instantly remember them. And I'm going to be talking about them here and now. Now, to make this video smooth along a lot faster, I'm not going to be explaining too much of what I need to say, and if I do miss a reference here and there, keep in mind I'm not looking on any wiki site. I didn't take any information from a page or anything, and I'm reading it off the list or anything. Like, this is all just from what I remember about video gaming and what I am reminded of, and all of the tropes and all of the feelings I get from seeing these moments in Scott Pilgrim that remind me of other moments in video gaming. And not everything is a specific reference. In Stage 6, Scott Pilgrim fights zombies, and you can reference that to anything. That could be Resident Evil, that could be Left 4 Dead, that could be the zombie horde mode in Call of Duty. Zombies have been a part of video gaming, and so have ninjas, so have robots. And you could really apply this to anything in gaming. So, just enjoy the show and have a fun time, and I'm just going to list it off one by one, in chronological order. So when the game boots up, we already get a special sign that tells us that winners don't eat meat, and that's actually referencing an old thing that would pop up on arcade machines. An FBI warning would show up when arcade machines started up, warning kids not to do drugs. And so that's pretty fun. The character select screen has a curtain that pretty much reminds you exactly of Super Mario Bros. 2. The world map is made up of a lot of yellow dots and roads that get paved after you cleared a level. This is pretty much exactly like it was in Super Mario World, the difference being Super Mario World had red dots where there were 2 exits to the level. There's even warp pipes in the world map itself, so it's clearly trying to be Mario. A lot of the attacks that Scott Pilgrim and his friends perform on enemies do remind you of certain video game characters. In Super Ghouls and Ghosts, the hero Arthur has a very heroic and valiant running animation as he goes to save the princess. Steven Stills pretty much runs exactly like Arthur. It's a very distinct animation. When clearing the levels, a lot of the characters disappear from the level in a very specific way. Scott Pilgrim beams out like a beam of light, very much like Mega Man used to do. Kim rides a star and floats on out of there, just like a certain pink puffball named Kirby. And Steven Stills jumps into a green warp pipe, once again being Mario. So Scott Pilgrim is obviously a beat-em-up game where you go left and right and beat up thugs that come your way. There have been a lot of beat-em-up games exactly like this. One of the big inspirations for Scott Pilgrim is River City Ransom. In River City Ransom, you also went from left to right, beating up random thugs, taking the money they dropped behind, picking up weapons to attack people with, and you could go into shops and buy items that would increase your strength or your defense or other stats as well. And you use the money that enemies dropped to pay for those. Scott Pilgrim was pretty heavily influenced by River City Ransom, including some of the plot details in the actual books. But, the optional battle with Mr. Chow is set in a grassy field at nighttime with thunder flashing in the background. This is very reminiscent of the opening of Ninja Gaiden, where Ryu Hayabusa's father and another ninja engaged in a very similar battle in a very similar location. In some of the recycling bins in level 1, you can see a clear triangular symbol. This triangular symbol is much like the Triforce in the Legend of Zelda series. On some of the walls you can also see these ghost graffiti outlines, and the ghosts clearly look like ghosts from the Pac-Man series. In Super Mario Bros. 2, finding a certain potion would allow you to make a door appear, and this door took you to a place called Subspace. And obviously, what's that little dimension Scott Pilgrim goes to when he enters doors with stars? Yes, Subspace. So that's a Super Mario Bros. 2 reference. Inside the Subspace levels themselves are some pretty heavy Mario references. One area looks exactly like Rainbow Road from the Mario Kart series, and another has pretty much blocks and coin blocks which release coins and the blocks that don't release coins. You know, it's pretty obviously Mario. The band playing in Matthew Patel's boss room is Crashin' the Boys. Crashin' the Boys was actually an NES video game. I'm probably reaching with this reference, but every time I play through level 2 and I see those dragon enemies, I'm always reminded of the dragon protagonist from Bubble Bobble. Am I crazy? I know he blows bubbles in those games and not fire, but I just look at him and I think, hey, it's Bubble Bobble. In order to progress in level 2, you actually have to take a key and carry it all the way over to the door in order to unlock it. Once again, this is very much like Super Mario Bros. 2, where you did the exact same thing. Mario would even lift the key over his head, and the only difference was something actually chased him in that game. At one point in level 2, you have to destroy a car before the time runs out. And this car will explode unless you do so, but in Street Fighter 2, when you had to smash up a car to a time limit, it was basically just to get a bonus score. Nothing really harmed your character. In Stage 3, you battle Envy Adams and Lynette the drummer. I've always found that they battle exactly the same way that Bebop and Rocksteady did in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4, Turtles in Time. One of them usually hangs in the back and does nothing until the other one tags them in, and you only have to kill one of the two opponents, and then they both kill each other off, out of sheer rage or stupidity, I'm not sure which. But I always thought Envy and Lynette were heavily based off of Bebop and Rocksteady. Lynette the drummer also has a bionic arm. This is very much like the main character of Bionic Commando. When you and Todd Ingram get into a bass battle, you're clearly playing what's supposed to be Guitar Hero. In both level 4 and level 6, you're able to pull out a turnip out of the ground and throw it at enemies. This is very similar to Super Mario Bros. 2, where you could do the exact same thing. The fourth Evil X, Roxy Richter, uses a sword which also acts as a whip. It has been stated that this is actually supposed to be mirroring Ivy Valentine from the Soul Calibur series, who also uses a very similar weapon. And personally, from nostalgia's sake, I think the idea of calling her Roxy Richter was pretty appropriate, considering Richter Belmont from the Castlevania series used a whip, and Roxy does as well. When Roxy Richter is defeated, she transforms into a pile of animals. This is supposed to be like when Sonic saves all the animals from the roboticizers in the Sonic the Hedgehog series. And whether this was actually a reference or not, I'm probably reaching with this one, but after defeating Roxy Richter, they cut to a scene where Stills and Kim are looking up to the moon. At the end of Sonic Advance, after defeating Dr. Eggman as Super Sonic, there's actually a very similar shot where all the heroes are looking up to the moon to see what Sonic had done. And I don't know if it was intentional, but it always seemed like that was a reference. Oh wait, I just spoiled Sonic Advance's ending. Enjoy the LP when it comes, guys! Uh-oh. In level 5, you'll see an anime character with blue hair and a red costume. You might be wondering who that guy is. Well, actually, he's from the game Clash at Demon Head. One of the subspace areas in level 5 is actually a high school hallway. Now, the end of River City Ransom kind of took place at a high school, so I'm gonna go and say this is a River City Ransom reference, but I could be reaching. In Stage 5, when you leave the party, we see Gideon in the background watching from the distance, and then he disappears. One of Gideon's nicknames is actually G-Man. In Half-Life, the G-Man was this mysterious figure who always watches the main character, Gordon Freeman, and he can be found in particular levels hiding. He's always usually a secret thing that you have to look out for, but the G-Man was always looking out at you from some hidden location on the map. Seeing Gideon watching your character from the background is kind of reminiscent of that. One of the mid-bosses in Stage 5 is known as Super Fighting Robot. When most people hear the name Super Fighting Robot, they might think of this.
Super Fighting Robot, Mega Man. Super Fighting Robot,
And aside from the name itself, the giant robot motif has been done before. Whether you're a Mega Man fan, or a Sonic fan, or some other video game fan I'm not remembering right now, we've generally had to fight giant robots once or twice. The Katayanagi twins' lair is very much like the last level in Double Dragon. In fact, the Katayanagi twins themselves could be seen as Double Dragon references. But really, I always like to think of the Katayanagi twins as just twin characters. And when I mean twin characters, I don't mean actual biological twins, which is what the Katayanagi twins are. But I also think of things like Ryu and Ken, who aren't biologically related, but they look pretty identical. Mario and Luigi, they look identical. The Double Dragon brothers, they look identical. Basically, any pair in a video game that really looks exactly the same, even though they may or may not be brothers, you know. It should also be mentioned that there was a very tough boss battle in River City Ransom against a pair of twins. They were considered the hardest bosses in the game. And the Katayanagi twins are considered the easiest bosses in this game. Reference? Maybe. In the Katayanagi twins' lair are all of these hanging ball orbs, which that's the only way I can describe it. These hanging ball orbs have also been in fortresses in the Super Mario Bros. 3 game. What also might be from Super Mario Bros. 3 are the statues in the Katayanagi twins' lair, because they kind of look like the Tanuki statues, only golden and Japanese and deadly. Also, that's a theme as well. Enemies blending in with the background and then rushing downwards to attack you. In Stage 6, a key needed to progress through the level is set on top of a pedestal in the middle of the forest. One could easily make the conclusion that this is supposed to be like the Master Sword, which is also sit on top of a pedestal in the forest, usually the Lost Woods, or the Temple of Time, or whatever. I always like to think that was a Master Sword reference. This whole level is Zelda-themed, really. As soon as you go to the secret mystery shop, you'll notice from the red walls and the way the windows are lined up that this looks exactly like an indoor building would in Zelda 2 for the NES. New enemies in Stage 6 are Wolverines, and the Wolverines like to slash at Scott and friends very rapidly. Well, if you're a fan of the Marvel vs. Capcom series, you might remember this slash because Wolverine actually does it. When he does the move Berserker Barrage, he actually does a swing very similar to the Wolverines in Scott Pilgrim. I have to believe that was a reference. At some point in level 6, these little elves with bags show up, and you can beat on them to get more money. In Golden Axe for the Sega Genesis, at the end of every level, you always had a scene where your character camped at a campfire, and then these little elvish characters with bags would come out and you hit them for power-ups. So I have to imagine that was a reference. Now the boss of Stage 6 is Nega Scott, a darker version of our main protagonist. Now a lot of people can draw parallels to Shadow Link from Zelda 2. Shadow Link was essentially the dark version of Link. He was also the final boss of Zelda 2, and he has shown up many times throughout the series. And in future series, he's been shown to have red eyes. And Nega Scott in the movie has also been shown to have red eyes. That's the only real conclusion I can add, that he was really based off of Shadow Link, especially since Stage 6 is filled with so many Zelda references as it is. But really, you could throw Nega Scott in there with anybody. You could throw him in there with Shadow the Hedgehog. You can throw him in there with Wario. The basic idea is that Nega Scott is supposed to be a darker version of our main character. He's supposed to be the dark anti-hero. Like the evil version, basically. The dark side version. And we've seen plenty of that in video games, believe me. Level 7 is home to the Chaos Theater. The author, Brian Lee O'Malley, has also stated that the Chaos Theater was definitely a reference taken from Earthbound. When Stage 7 begins, you find yourself fighting in an elevator. Once again, common in beat-em-ups, an elevator usually shows up at some point during the game. I don't know why, they just usually do. I've pointed out the fact that Gideon Graves has a logo, and the logo is actually an upside-down Triforce with G's in the actual Triforce itself. Or you could say they're G's, or you could say they're sideways 7s, because he's the 7th Evil X. Ha ha ha. But supervillains having big evil logos isn't a new thing in video games. Whether you're Bowser, whether you're Eggman, whether you're the Umbrella Corporation, logos have a great way to signify who the bad guys are. And I like that Gideon has a logo. When Gideon first fights you, he actually hulks up and becomes a much bigger, menacing form of himself. This is very common in video games. Hey, Vayne from Final Fantasy XII. Hulk out! Hey, Joker from Batman Arkham Asylum. Hulk out! Hey, Bowser, how you doing? Hulk out! If a bad guy has a chance to turn himself huge and strong, I think he'll take advantage of it. After defeating Gideon, you are sent to a pathway with dripping blood. This is actually very similar to Mega Man 2, where the final hallway leading to the final boss was actually a hallway dripping with blood. In that area, there was also no music, and the blood actually damaged you. At the end of the hallway, you run into Medusa Heads, and Medusa Heads are very notorious Castlevania enemies that love to attack you when you're climbing upstairs. So Gideon Graves himself, the big uber god boss, I always like to think that this could be any Final Fantasy boss. A lot of people seem to think it's a Kefka reference, but you know what? You could make it a Sephiroth reference, you could make it an X-Death reference, hell, you could make it an Ansem from Kingdom Hearts reference. The point is, for some reason, the final bosses in Final Fantasy games always turn into fucking god monsters with giant fucking tentacles and little human screaming faces at the bottom of their bodies and other faces all over them, and it's all fucked up, and I don't know where Square gets their drugs, but they're crazy. After defeating Gideon, you find yourself running through the Techno Base, and as a big TMNT4 lover, I have always drawn parallels to this level and the Technodrome level. In both this and the Technodrome level, you had a stainless steel white type of laboratory area with lots of small miniature robots that you could one-shot and kill, and I don't know, I always drew parallels to the Technodrome, honestly. At some point in level 7, there's also a screen where a conveyor belt leads to a bottomless pit, and the screen doesn't go any forward from there. This actually looks very much like the location of the first boss fight in Double Dragon when you fought Big Bald Abobo. When you actually confront Gideon for the last time, he is shown sitting atop a throne which turns into bats. At the end of the Castlevania series, you usually found yourself facing off with Dracula, who was also in a throne room very similar-like. After defeating Gideon, you learn the twist that he was a robot and that the real Gideon was activating him from behind a hologram machine. This is in fact exactly how Mega Man 2 ended. You battled what you thought was Dr. Wily. It short-circuited, we saw Wily was operating this machine the whole time, and then he jumps out and begs for forgiveness, as he does in every Mega Man game. And as Gideon does in the Scott Pilgrim game. When the Chaos Theater crumbles into the ground at the end of the game, it leaves behind boxers tied to a stick, very much like a white flag. In the Super Mario World game, every time you destroyed a castle, it always left behind a white flag, and I have to imagine this was a Mario World reference. And anywho, guys, that's all the references that I can come up with. This is all the references that come to mind with me. If you think you spot any, feel free to mention them in the comments, and, yeah. Because really, a lot of the references in the game might not be references at all. Some of it is just me reading into what I think it reminds me of. The great thing about Scott Pilgrim is that it's such a tribute to video gaming. Some could call it outright theft and outright plagiarism. But I like to think it's a giant tribute to video games. Every time I saw a reference, I immediately smiled and thought, man, this game knows what it's talking about. This game knows video games. And that adds a little bit of authenticity, and it adds a little bit of love that I know the creators had when they were making this game. And it makes me appreciate the game that much more. So, you know, I hope you enjoyed this reference video. It took a while for me to edit and talk about it and make it. But at long last, the Scott Pilgrim video is complete. I am done. It's over. Whew! I hope you enjoyed the LP, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed the references. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World for the Xbox Live or the PlayStation Network. Get it, because it's an amazing game. And if you haven't gotten it, well, what the fuck? What the fuck? Anyway, I am the Great Clement. Toodles.